and welcome back to A Better World. This is your host, Mitchell J. Rabin, and I'm very glad you're joining us again today. I'm very glad you're joining us today because we're going to have a very interesting show. We have invited to join us today to continue the themes that we are frequently bringing forward here on A Better World regarding health and nutrition and the state of the earth and the way of pollution and what we can do about it, and global warming and climate change. You know, all of these things that make such a huge difference in the very quality of our daily lives. And what we're seeing, of course, is a phenomenal acceleration in the destruction of our planet through the use of contaminants, of chemistry, of fossil fuels, and on and on. It's creating such degradation. And it's affecting the food supply, it's affecting the weather, it's affecting every aspect of our daily lives, and it's becoming more and more. So we very much wanted to have the founder of smallplanet.org, Frances Moore Lappe, the author of the renowned book, Diet for a Small Planet, and more recently, Economics, Changing the Way We Think to Create the World We Want. Frances has been a pioneer in helping people think through these issues literally for decades at this point, and she has done extraordinary work in waking people up by giving them the education that does not come through our ordinary means. It does require alternative media and people thinking out of the box in order to get the education we so need in order to get our ways, our thinking, our habits as a people onto the right track. So it's really an honor and a pleasure to have Frances joining us today to go into some depth about what she thinks we need to do to get back on track. So, Frances, are you with us?
I am. Very
so
happy
glad
to
to
be
have
with
you on A Better World. Good.
Thank
good,
you.
Good. Sure. Well, I've been an admirer of your work for a long time, and it's really good to have you directly in person on our show today to interact with our audience, to speak and educate us all about the real groundbreaking work you've been doing. So in EcoMind, as an example, changing the way we think to create the world we want, you outline what you referred to as a series of thought traps. Nice phrase. Could you walk us through some of these and what you mean by them and what we have to be on the outlook for?
Well, our thought traps are a product of something even deeper, and I will go into thought traps because I've come to see that we create the world not as it is, but as we are, as our thought system, and that is critical to understand, that we actually, we create the world that we believe is possible, and if we don't believe it's possible, we can't even see it. So let me just start by saying that the root of the thought traps that are doing us in right now is grounded in what I call scarcity mind, which is now totally disproven by science, that reality is about separateness, it's about stasis, that is, things are relatively fixed, and it's about scarcity. There's not enough of anything, there's not enough goods and there's not enough goodness in the world.
Sure.
And so from that starting point, we feel pretty powerless. And so we end up in this downward spiral of powerlessness, and that is what I argue in the book, that really, although we are so concerned and need to be about climate change, about poverty, about hunger, that really all the solutions to all these things are known. So what we really need to focus on is what makes us feel powerless. And so that's where
And then, of course, conversely, what makes us feel powerful.
Exactly, because if we can see how our own thought system is making us feel powerless, we can reverse that. And so what I do is draw what I call the eco-mind, which is grounded in science as well as my everyday experience when I started realizing it. And that is that the nature of life is connection, connectivity, it's continuous change, and therefore co-creation. So we see the power right there that we have. Once we recognize reality as continuous change and all connected, then we see that the only choice we don't have is whether to change the world. Because if we're all connected and change is continuous, then every choice we do or don't make is changing the world. So I start from that contrast, and then I say, okay, what are the thought traps, the expressions, the ways of talking, the ways of thinking that keep us in the negative, keep us in the sense of powerlessness? And so I take on some pretty common messages, such as we've hit the limits of a finite earth, right? We hear that a lot. And what I argue is that that framing increases our fear, and therefore we know, psychologists tell us, when we're afraid that we actually become more materialistic and more self-interested. And so I argue that actually what we're hitting the limits of is the damage that our scarcity mind can do, the damage that human beings can wreak without incredible, horrible consequences. But the earth, there's plenty. There's 15,000 times the daily dose of energy from the sun every day hitting the earth compared to what we're using in fossil fuels. Just one example.
You're making a very fundamental point, and if I may just extract it for a moment, because this is a subject we deal with, Francis, on A Better World all the time, because my actual background is in psychology and psychotherapy. I came to looking at the planet and what we're doing to the planet through that lens. So it's like I love the phrase eco-mind because I saw that is really the issue. It's not an external issue. It's really an internal issue of working with our own minds, our own belief systems, our own perceptions, which, as you well put it, have created this notion of scarcity, of impoverishment, of powerlessness and helplessness. But it is really only our mind that has done that has told us that story, that narrative, so to speak. But we can flip that because we've got the technologies, we've got the know-how to live a sustainable, creative, and, by the way, profitable lifestyle without doing the damage to the earth herself or to each other. Is that a fair...
Exactly. Thank you. Beautiful. And so for me, to sum up what you said, it's one shift. It's a shift from we've hit the limits, ouch, we've hit the limits, to alignment. Alignment. We can align. We can deep breathe. We can say,
there you go.
If we align with the laws of nature, there is plenty for each of us, and that means not just aligning with the laws of biology and physics in the natural world. It is also aligning with our own nature, and that's the other key part here, that we human beings, we are like any other species in the environment. We respond to our context. It determines a great deal what comes out in us, whether we are cooperative or whether we are self-centered. And so that's why a lot of the book is really about what are the conditions that bring out the best in our species. And that is key to understanding what I mean by eco-mind. So I'm arguing in the book that there are three conditions that historically and in lab experiments on us, the human species, three conditions that pretty much regularly bring out the very worst in us. And those are the concentration of power, secrecy in human relationships, and othering, blaming. Whether it's blaming the 1% or Mitt Romney blaming the 47%, right? It's blaming at culture.
Yes.
So I argue that now we have a compass that we can see what are the conditions that bring out the best in our species, and I argue that they are the opposite of those three negatives. They are the continuous dispersion of power, transparency in human relationships, and mutual accountability, where we realize if we're all connected, we're all implicated. And yes, we can hold others accountable, but we have to hold ourselves accountable as well.
Yes.
So that is really a freeing frame for me.
Very much so. You're reminding me of the famous writer Abraham Heschel, who said, "Few are guilty, all are responsible."
Ah, perfect.
Yeah, the mutual accountability part of it. Yeah.
Yes, and so I just feel like in my life this way of seeing has really helped me to make choices about where to put my energies and how to explain reality and and encouraged me to take seriously the contributions that I'm making with every daily choice. Because we are shaping reality moment to moment. And so I also argue that because we are shaped by our context, unless we see examples of solutions, of people like us engaged in solutions, it's very hard for us not to be despairing. And so I wrote a blog last year in Huffington Post. I think it was just called sharing a solution story is a revolutionary act. And it's just this theme that it's so important for us to both absorb and to share stories of possibility, I call it. And that's why our work in our institute a lot of it is about showing people what is working, what can work, and not just staying in the downward view.
Right. The blame mode. You know, by the way, just for any of you who didn't quite get the smart reference that Francis just made of solutions as a revolutionary act was really a mutation of Orwell, who said telling the truth at times becomes a revolutionary act at times of government oppression. So that was very smart, and I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I wanted to say that it is only natural, and I think people ought to give themselves the space, even in light of all the good that you're saying, Francis, that as someone wakes up and sees what the power distribution curve really is, distinct from what they may have thought it may have been, and they look at what damage has been caused through the programming we've all been recipients of growing up, there's going to be shock and awe of a real sort, and some upset and anger as natural consequences. You know, it's like the little chick bursting out of the egg in spring. You know, it's not all 100% lovely. It's wonderful because it's life-giving, but it's also, wow, this is cold or uncomfortable or whatever. And so there is a natural, I would say, psychological and emotional maturing and evolution that occurs to get to the point that you are at now. And, you know, some are, but you see what I'm saying.
Absolutely. And I call it this moment of dissonance. And as you, in your psychological training, you understand that there are these moments where people go along, and then suddenly it just doesn't work anymore for them. And what they thought was meaningful has no meaning, and it's terrifying. So those are those scary moments, and they've happened in my life where, you know, I had to make a choice. Do I just stay in fear and just and not change, or do I put myself into that a spiral of possibility and move forward? And I have a lot of thoughts about that too, because I think that what we're real. Well, I think that the key here is that we recognize the double edge of our social nature. You know, we often attack or criticize our species for being so individualistic, or certainly the American version. But actually, we are so social. Our species is the most social species, and we so depend on other people's judgment. And we know if we really wake up, we're going to have to break some ties and maybe break some hearts with people who don't agree with the new views that we're acting out of. And that is terrifying for the social animal that we are. And we evolved in such tightly knit tribes. And so my advice for us is to recognize that social nature, and therefore to seek out and to know that as we step out, we will help to create new tribes of risk takers. And so it's not that we're asking people to step out and be alone, but to be able to walk with that fear enough to break with something that's not working for us and help to create the new tribes of risk takers, as I put it. And so I wrote a little book about fear. If you're a psychology person, I'd love to send it to you.
Yes.
The publisher said Americans were too afraid to read a book about fear, so the fear word is only in the subtitle. The subtitle is Choosing Courage in a Culture of Fear, and but it's about rethinking fear itself as just a source of energy, because you're right, Mitch, that this is to make really profound change, we're going to experience some discomfort, and that's okay. We can live with it because the rewards are so great. Just to throw in about the rewards, suicide is a pandemic today in the world, 60% increase in the last half century, and there are now more people who are committing suicide than are killed in all wars and all homicide today.
Yeah.
So that is a response
even
to
among
a world
the soldiers,
that's not working.
Even among the soldiers, Frances, there are more suicides among them when they come back from the wars than they are losing.
Yeah. I just don't even it's funny, I haven't even let that sink in. Not funny, but I've heard that, but I just it's so horrible. But my point about that is that I can't prove it, but my hunch is that a lot of that is because our social reality does not meet our most basic human needs for connection and meaning and sense of agency in our lives. And so if we're going to avoid despair, avoid depression, avoid, just any desire to end our own lives, then we've got to learn that we can walk with that fear of change and find people who are aligned with what I call the risk-taker tribe. And that's where the satisfaction and the great joy, because, if we don't experience ourselves changing, it's very hard to believe that the world writ large can change. And so we have to believe that we're capable of taking on new challenges. And that honestly, writing this book, Economies, really brought up a lot of fear for me, because I thought, even in that message that I the hitting the limits of a finite Earth, a lot of environmentalists don't like me at all to criticize that frame. And in fact, I just gave a talk in which a professor of ecology came up and almost shook my shoulders. I said, "Oh, so angry at me." And I tried to explain that when people hear that, they think that if you say to most people we've hit the limits of the Earth, they think that we've hit the limits of the Earth to meet their needs. And so they'll just become, more like, oh, I've got to get mine before it's all gone. So that's what I tried to explain.
I'm really enjoying this with you, because it's entirely different than the standard environmental perspective, but it contains, you could say, the statistics of it, but not the world view of it. And I really, especially with my background in both environmentalism and psychology, I especially appreciate this. And there's something else that I think would probably anger. It's funny you bring that up. Your standard is so funny, a standard environmental perspective, because it's supposed to be very wide and very resilient and very broad-based. But you bring something up in the book regarding, as one of the thought traps, the idea of no growth versus slow growth, or, an economic growth. And as I read that, I thought, whoa, she is out on a limb here, because there's this automatic knee-jerk reaction that an environmentalist who seeks to protect the Earth and her resources would would espouse a no-growth notion, but that's very anti-Earth. It's very anti-life. There's no thing on Earth that doesn't grow, or it simply dies, and that includes an economy. So maybe you could speak to that a little bit. I very much appreciated your willingness to speak out like that.
Yeah, I was very nervous. But my first critique of that notion of that no growth is the answer is that it unwittingly then it means that you're saying to the listener that what we have now is growth. And that's my first problem, because what we have now is an economy largely of waste and destruction, that most of the energy that is produced in this country is wasted. 30, 40, even more percent of our food is wasted, on and on. And so much of what we buy turns to waste immediately. So I think it's wrong to call what we're doing now growth, because, as you say, growth is very positive. We want our tulips to grow. We want our children to grow.
Right.
So we shouldn't use it to describe something that is actually destroying. So that's number one. Number two, again, most people in the world are struggling. So many people are underemployed or unemployed, and so you say to them, we need no growth, and you think that that's going to work to motivate them. They'll think they've been totally left out, right?
Exactly.
So
more than they already feel.
More than they already feel. It's like nobody's listening to my need. So what we need are thriving. Let's just drop this language and talk about thriving, flourishing economies. And we can have that, and however we set it up, where growth is something that we define. So let's define it as that which is really flourishing, life flourishing. And now, as I'm sure you know, there are many alternative measures of genuine progress indicator, the happiness index, many ways. In fact, I'm on a panel.
Right.
Like Bhutan. I was in Bhutan a year ago because I'm so honored to be part of an international panel that is advising the government of Bhutan. And anybody listening can go and just Google Bhutan and new development paradigm, and you can go to the UN document that we prepared under the leadership of the Bhutanese government, looking at how we measure true human and ecological thriving. And so that's really that's the direction. So we can drop the silly kind of argument about growth and no growth, and really talk about what would it look like to have. What does it look like to have flourishing economies? I mean, I was just in India a year and a half ago, and it was like walking into a village that was the embodiment of everything I've ever dreamt of, because it was thriving villages that had been desperately famine-like conditions 20 years ago. And women organized and meet weekly and have created this democratic ecological agriculture and ecological decision-making. And,
was this with Vandana Shiva, Francis?
No, it was with a group called the Deccan Development Society, 75 villages part of it, and they even have their own radio station where they share this news. But, that's an example. That is a thriving economy. That is not a no-growth economy. They have 20 crops in 1 acre, and they bought their own cooperative, processing machine, a simple, processing, and they have a medicinal plant garden that they grow and that they share. And as I said, they have a radio station. And so there's an example.
What a wonderful
They're not no-growth.
Yes, that's right.
And they meet every
week. That's flourishing growth. That's what it is. It's flourishing growth.
Absolutely. And they were beaming with pride and excitement. And they said 20 years ago, it was dark time. They lived in humiliation, in fear, and in hunger. They said they were so poor they could only buy one sari. They couldn't even wash their complete clothes. At a time they had to, they had to wash one piece of their their sari cloth at once, and then move that around.
Yes.
And it was just, and to go in just a couple decades to this stage.
Awesome.
So, it was
and
very,
it's called,
very
and the group that put this together Tell us the name again.
It's called the Deccan, DECCAN, Deccan Development Society, and they have a beautiful website. And last time I looked, they still had my blog about them on their homepage, which I was very proud of. But you can read about this and how they're convincing the regional government to actually procure some of their millet, which is much more nutritious than the industrial rice that the government subsidizes, and actually encourages a whole rebirth of Indian agriculture that is much healthier than the polished rice.
Oh, I am so happy to hear this. First of all, I love India. I've been there a number of times, and it's in my blood. I know the work of Vandana Shiva, which is just brilliant. And
yes, absolutely. And I was with her also on this trip,
You were, it would stand to reason. As well as I know Dr. Mohammed Yunus with the Grameen Bank that is doing so much to help women in India and in Bangladesh and everywhere in the world, really, with the microloans that is helping women get empowered. So this is another step in that wonderful direction to hear about this.
And so we see people like these women I met. And, so I come home completely fired up and just want to share this, because how can I feel it's hopeless, if they, in their situation, found the courage, and they found it together. They found it by working together. And our motto of our organization is, hope is not what we find in evidence, it's what we become in action together. And that's really what they embody. And so any of our listeners who are feeling down, I think the cure is very much to join with others who are working very practically on the solutions that are all around us, and that is the key to overcoming the understandable heartbreak, and that we, that is, as you started out saying, that is totally justified by the devastation.
By the conditions, exactly, that we have in some way created and need to now resolve. So,
And can I just add one thing on that solutions orientation, just because the new Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change just came out with a report. And one of the things that I've been studying in the last few months for a new book I'm writing about world hunger is one of the most encouraging things for me, and you, I'm sure, know this, but that food and agriculture is a huge contributor. The non-greenhouse gas emissions, non-fossil fuel greenhouse gas emissions are about 40% of all of them. It's a big chunk, the non-fossil fuel piece, and a lot of that is.
Are you talking about methane?
I'm talking about methane, nitrous oxide, and carbon dioxide from deforestation. So the non-fossil fuel piece of it is about 40%, according to the EPA. And a lot of that relates to our food system and the way we're treating our soil. And all of us, every one of us, can contribute to a climate-friendly food system by buying local, by buying organic, so that we're restoring the soil that can hold that carbon, by planting, by reforesting. All of us can contribute to these efforts, and it is huge. And also on the meat question, I learned this fact that blew me away. Even though you'd think I wouldn't be
Please
shocked.
Share this with us. This is
three-quarters.
This is your bailiwick. We want to pick your mind.
See what you think of this one, because it's a mind bender. 3/4 of all agricultural land in the world is now going to feed livestock. And livestock return to humans 16% of our calories. 3/4 of all agricultural land give us 16% of our calories. And so a lot of the deforestation that's related to that's also contributing horribly to the greenhouse gas. And, of course, the methane, as you mentioned, nitrous oxide, that is a very, very powerful chemical, many more times more potent than carbon.
What is that an off-gassing from, nitrous oxide?
Fertilizer.
Okay.
mainly nitrogen fertilizer, and also just I think it is just actually working with the earth itself releases some, but fertilizer is the main source.
And now this is a natural fertilizer as well as
no,
artificial?
This is the synthetic fertilizer. Yeah.
Okay.
Primarily the synthetic, the manufacturers' fertilizers that are now spreading, and we have so much of this nitrogen. The other thing I learned that is so shocking is that of all this nitrogen that is that helping to contribute to this nitrous oxide problem, that's a major greenhouse gas, only about at most 15% of that nitrogen that's supposed to feed plants actually gets to the plants. The rest goes into the groundwater and then into the bodies of water and create these quote-unquote dead zones that you've probably read about, of where that are deprived of oxygen, that mean that aquatic life is killed.
Yeah.
So all the way around,
and coral reefs are going with it. Yeah.
Yes, and everybody is excited about organic agriculture because it reduces the chemical exposure of farm workers and it reduces the consumer's exposure. Please also know that you are contributing, and pay a little bit more and smile, because you are contributing to part of the answer to climate change and just a friendlier earth to greet us. And as you eat less grain-fed meat, certainly, but less meat, and it is not only, of course, better for our health, but again, a very direct way to put your vote for sanity in terms of the earth itself. That
is really so important, Frances. I so appreciate your sharing this with us. Is there any kind of animal husbandry that exists that is what you would call earth-friendly and sustainable?
Well, certainly poultry, for example, getting animal protein from poultry versus ruminants like cows are the worst. So red meat is the worst. So certainly as we shift away from red meat, that's the biggest single step toward a planet-friendly diet. But also the other statistic that I just learned in an article related to the drought in California, that it takes 50 times more water to produce a unit of meat.
A pound of meat.
I think it's meat.
Yeah, you mentioned this in your book. Yeah.
Than it does vegetables. So water is a huge, after we've heard about, if it not experienced the California drought, that we know how huge that is. And so, again, a plant-centered diet is also a planet-friendly diet. So
it really is.
That, as well as our bodies love it, will thank us too, because we know that they thrive on a plant-centered diet.
In itself, that is something that each of us really can do ourselves to make a big difference in reducing our carbon footprint, is our eating habits, just as you're describing, and going to a plant-based
and reducing our
diet.
waste. Do you know that the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, says that if food waste were a country, it would be the third largest greenhouse gas emitter. Get your head around that.
Oh, my God. Exactly.
We waste so much food.
Just what goes into the landfill. That's another point you made in the book. The waste of food. Living in New York City, Frances, and I see the waste that goes on from just what's thrown out from restaurants every single night. I had friends that were connected to a spiritual community that would harvest the food, quite literally, from restaurants to bring it to feed the homeless. And these people were eating like kings and queens, actually, funnily enough, ironically enough. But, this is just another example of what it is you're saying here. There's this idea that I heard just yesterday that was utterly disturbing, and I'd like to know if you heard of anything. Get ready for this. But it's organic GMO. Now, if you want to talk about word salad and doublespeak, Monsanto, of course, is the captain of that. And here we have what is now being referred to as organic GMO. Have you heard that phrase?
I've heard of it. Actually, I haven't read about it myself, but
Yeah.
boy, let me just say
someone
here
in conversation mentioned this to me.
Really, on
and it was
GMOs,
just so disturbing. I didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
It was hard to keep a straight face.
Well, we've done, I think, a really good job on our website. A really short, it's 7 things to. I think, what did we end up calling it? 7 things to tell your friends about GMOs. 7 reasons.
Really good reasons to rethink GMOs.
Okay.
I'm looking at it right now.
Really good reasons.
Love it.
Yeah, we changed it from the blog. Really good reasons. And but we worked so hard, and you can, on one page, and it's all cited from, almost all of them are peer-reviewed studies that you can find. If you go into it, if you want to read all about it, you can go on our website and read all the citations. We've narrowed it down to these 7 points, and they are, I think, so powerful. And the bottom line, we end up saying, wait a minute. Why would any species take a risk it did not have to take? And we do not have to take this risk. We have more than enough food in the world, traditional, and with the breeding that we know how to do, that people have done for millennia, we know how to continue to breed seeds that are appropriate as the climate changes. So, but there are, of course, many other points, including the fact that quite a number of peer-reviewed studies have found evidence of harm in animal studies fed GMOs. So, and anyway, I really encourage people to look at that, because I think of all the things that I've seen, I'm really proud we've done something that's not sensational. It's here are the facts that you could explain to your brother-in-law, to your kid.
Right.
This is not knee-jerk. We're not anti-science. In fact, this science of GMOs is a very crude science because the outcome is inherently unknown. So
yes, exactly.
I highly recommend anyone to who's wondering to look at that.
Yes, exactly. Well, there are so many good efforts being made by people like my friend Jeffrey Smith to educate people about GMOs, and they're out there, like what was happening in California now has happened in Connecticut, actually, which is the country leader in insisting on GMO labeling, and that whole movement.
Wonderful. And I'll just point out here that 64 countries require labeling on GMOs. I think, and one other, I think it's Canada, 2 countries, industrial countries, that do not. I mean, this is, for people that pride itself on being a democratic
freedom
leader, this is really, really sad. So just basic information is the right to know. This is so important.
Exactly. It really is. Well, you are doing a lot to help bring out the truth about these things, including the basis in science. And science is our friend, and bad science is not. And science is skewed depending on who's paying for it. And we know that for a long time now in the pharmaceutical industry and elsewhere, chemical industry, oil industry, etc. What do you see as our biggest obstacle toward breaking through the fossil fuel stronghold that we've got on our society at large right now? I mean, I know that you believe that ultimately we're dealing, as do I, with a psychological issue finally. I go another level in the sense that I kind of analyze the whole idea of acquisition and holding on and seeking out power through money, the acquisition and the multitude of money that the Wall Street group seeks to aggregate. And I ultimately look at all of that psychologically, Francis, as the core issue. The thing about greed is based completely on fear of not having enough, of not surviving, and ultimately really of not feeling loved enough. And so they have this contracted grip on the material world, And, I mean, that's a whole other kind of conversation. But I would love to know what you think about this particular part of the larger picture.
Well, connected to what you just said, which I agree, is another aspect of it that I believe that this scarcity of goods and goodness, the scarcity of belief in ourselves, allows us, encourages us, enables us to discount the possibility of real democracy. Because if we have such a dim view of ourselves and others that we really are selfish and materialistic and competitive, and that's all we are, then of course we can't come together in common problem solving, which is democracy. And so we feel defeated in creating a democracy that's truly accountable to us, and that's the only way that I can explain how we use the term of democracy, but we have, in fact, a political system that is answerable to money. Unfortunately, it's the best democracy money can buy, which is not good enough.
Right. As Greg Howard said in his book. Right.
Yeah. And also, I love the term that it's not mine, unfortunately, but I don't know who started it, but privately held government. Privately held government.
Oh, yes.
is what we have. And so how do we get democracy? And it has to start with a belief that it's possible. And I would argue that there are other societies that presumably the people there aren't any smarter or better than we are, who've done an amazing job of keeping money out of the system. I speak of Germany, for example. One of the reasons that it is a global leader in renewable energy is because the fossil fuel industry does not control the government. And so Germany ranks 83 out of 100 on a ranking of uncorrupted by money government, uncorrupted, 83, you know where we are? 29 with Tajikistan. So my point here is that we have to believe that we deserve and that we can actually build real democracy, and that means right now in Congress there is legislation, a government by the people with well over 100 co-sponsors that you're not hearing about on TV, but it is a bipartisan effort, and you can find out about it at of.by.us. And it is a system for, while we work, yes, I believe ultimately in a constitutional amendment, but that's down the road, because you know that you have to get 3/4 of the states, state legislative bodies to vote for it. So that's not going to happen anytime soon. But what we can work for, and there are even some Republicans behind this, is a system that would enable us to have people running for office, running for federal office, using small donations and not using any corporate or big bucks donations. And then we as citizens get a tax credit for our $25 that we contribute. That's then matched many times over by a federal fund. That sort of system would pass muster, according to all the legal experts, would pass muster with the Supreme Court, because it's voluntary. So we have to believe that we can do this. And ultimately, democracy is, I mean, we can't meet the climate change challenge. We can't meet the hunger challenge without democracy. And I believe that we can do it. I've seen it. I saw it in that village in India, and even Germany, which was a fascist state when I was born. And look at it now; it's a global leader.
That's right. That's right. They are generating through wind and solar and geothermal at least 25 to 30% of their total electrical output through renewables at this point.
Yeah,
it might even be a little higher than that.
Well, let me tell you this shocking number, that in 2010, Germany, which is the size of Montana or smaller, cloud cover of Alaska, produced almost half of the world's solar power.
Oh, no. Really?
So tell me we can't do this, come on.
Yeah, right. we have 30 Montanas,
Right, with much more sun. So
Exactly. That is a startling revelation.
Yeah.
And thank you for that. It's great. What would you like to just tell our audience in closing about your work and about what you feel further? I mean, you've been wonderful and just full of abundant information and facts for us, and examples as well, like the Indian project. I think that's just brilliant.
Well,
there's
I believe...
nothing like seeing a model in action. There's
I know.
nothing that replaces it.
Exactly. Yeah. So
let me just also say,
mm-hmm.
I've had Jean Houston on. I've known her for many years as well, who is a leader in so many ways, consultant to the UN, and she's worked with some 106 or 108 countries around the world on a grassroots level, Francis, helping them be empowered around the stories they tell on the village level about what's possible. And she's
mm-hmm.
involved in training the youth to take on roles of replenishing the stories, the art, as well as the food, through things such as what you were describing in India, that kind of grassroots thing. It's awesome what's going on. And the work of Paul Hawken in Blessed Unrest tells another story of literally millions of organizations, not just people, organizations that are committed to creating a better world, and creating happiness and sustainability. So you're part of, and of course we too are part of that movement. I'd love to hear what you have to say, in some final words to our audience.
Well, for any of us, any of you who are feeling overwhelmed and discouraged, I believe in the buddy system. I believe in the buddy system, and that we as we make commitments and talk to one another. So if you don't have an ally in your life who is taking some risk and inspiring you, think of somebody that really wants to make change that and reach out to them. Take that risk, and together decide on things that you can do to make a change that will enable you to feel a sense of agency and power and meaning and connection. And I would also say I love the idea of committing to at least once a week, if not once a day, to bringing into your life, to your consciousness, this story of possibility in any of these dimensions, and then sharing it with someone, making that a discipline, making that an empowerment discipline. And we have many such things on our website, but I also recommend Solutions Journal and Yes Magazine are excellent sources. But, making that a practice. And I also, this theme of learning to be comfortable with discomfort, to recognize that if we're going to really do what we need to do, a little fear is okay, and getting outside of our comfort zones. And so I would just ask anyone listening to think about, I would say, okay, before midnight tonight, what is one thing I can do that will take me out of my comfort zone for what I believe in? And, searching out new people or taking one action that pushes me in a new way that's a little bit beyond what I thought I could do, and then doing it and committing to that. And, we'd love to hear from people who are making these commitments. We have on our Facebook page at Small Planet, we have a Commit SPI little tag thing where people can write down what they've committed to, or you can send your commitment to us at info@smallplanet.org. But I think making these public statements, then we're more motivated to actually follow through. And I think that this core idea of EcoMind is that if we're all implicated, if we're all connected, we're all implicated, and therefore the only choice we don't have is whether to change the world. And the choice we do have, each of us, is how we're going to change it, So no action is still action, right? So that's kind of my challenge to myself, and I think it's the kind of energy. And one more thing. Bring some young people into your life. That's what also helps me so much, of having young people in their 20s and 30s in my life, and who are just on fire,
Yes. And they have the social media understanding, they have the tech understanding, and from us they can get a little bit more of the natural perspective understanding,
Yeah,
I think
and I
great.
feel that I've experienced this generation is really more open, much more open to elders than, the 60s generation, which I was am part of. And so be all of us, who are listening, who are not young anymore, don't feel that you're going to be rejected by the young people, because I find the opposite, that they're eager for learning from those who've been here and know what it feels like to be part of change.
I love it. I love it. Beautiful. Frances, I just want to thank you again for being a guest on our show today. It really, your work is fabulous, and it just keeps pushing us forward evolutionarily, mentally, and now we have the Eco-Mind to help to develop. I think back to one of the greatest influences on me is the Chinese poet Lao Tzu, who is credited with the founding of the Taoist way of thinking, and in his poem, the Tao Te Ching. And to me, this notion of Eco-Mind is sort of embedded in his verse, this notion that we are really aligned with the way, and the way of nature, that is. And it's represented with the flow of a river, and we're all part of it. And it's just the way it is, and we think our way out of it, but it's not true. So we have to be, vigilant about that as well. Well,
yes, I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah. I feel that there are historical antecedents to virtually everything we're doing today, and it looks new, it smells new, but it ain't new, and it's okay. It has a new spin on it, and that's the way we are. We like trends and fashions and entertainment, and it's fine, but as long as it's got meaning and heart to it, and your institute very much does. And why don't you say the website for people to go visit?
It's smallplanet.org, and also they can find there a workshop that was created by a young woman, speaking of youth, and it's Eco-Mind Workshop, and it has clips of my presentation of some of the core concepts, but it's a group process that you can go through with your friends or in your church group or in your classroom, you name it. So it's the Eco-Mind Workshop. If you just click on the Eco-Mind book, you'll see the link to the workshop.
Oh, fabulous. And before letting you go, I see on your website that you're going to be in the Big Apple. Actually, it looks like next week with Jane Goodall at the 92nd Street Y.
I am. I'm so pleased. I'm reading her book now. Oh, you will love her book, Seeds of Hope.
Oh, really?
My goodness. I could go on and on. Yeah, she's a superhero to me, and I'm bringing my 7-year-old granddaughter to meet her. So it's going to be a very special night.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I'm so
glad. I get
glad.
to interview
I'm
Jane.
so
I get to interview her. So
on the stage at 92nd Street Y?
Yeah.
Is that it? Oh, that's fabulous. Yeah. That's fabulous.
Yeah.
Well, if I can get up there, I will do so for sure.
Great. That's on the 8th.
That sounds great. Yes, I have it. I see it right on your website, so that's great. Jay, I want to just say, Frances, thank you again for being a guest today.
My great pleasure.
So
You're wonderful. Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Thank
you. And we will talk again soon. We'll have you on A Better World TV one of these times you come down to New York.
Okay. It's a deal.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Good. My pleasure. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Well, that was empowering for me, and I surely hope it was for you. Frances Lappe is really, as I said at the very beginning, one of the real pioneers in helping us all get educated about the nature of our relationship to the earth and to nature, and that we are a living part of that nature. One of the points that I remember reading recently in her book, Eco-Mind, the Changing the World We Think to Creating the World We Want, is that our bodies are a series of ecosystems. She didn't put it quite that way. She made reference specifically to the mouth and the bacteria that grows in the mouth. And these are living beings with their home is our mouth, just as we have a home with a roof and walls and windows, so too do these bacteria. and they're at home. And the same with our gut, and the same with the interstitial spaces between our cells, and on it, every single cell is its own home, the nucleus, etc. So when you begin to see that we are nature, we're not separate from nature. The only thing that separates us from nature is our thought that we're separate. It's just a thought. And the thought itself is natural. It's an electrochemical activity, event, if you will, in part of our whole system. So it's interesting. However you look at it, we are au naturel. And that's the way we were designed to be, and that's what we are. No matter how smart we get, no matter how technologically advanced we become, at the end of the day, we consist of nature's elements, and we just want to be aware of that, sensitive to that, and respectful of that. So, my dear friends, this is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World, and you can visit us at our website, abetterworld.tv, and I hope you do it. And if you do not yet get our newsletter, please do sign up. It's free. It comes out just about once a week, rarely more, and on it I announce who will be the guests on the TV and radio shows. If there are guests, sometimes they're not. Sometimes you are the guest, and I invite you to call in and talk with me and ask questions and pick my brain and whatever it is you'd like in that regard. So, last, in closing, I want to mention, make an announcement that there will be a very special Indian doctor in town, New York City, and actually he'll be just arriving in New York on the 7th, named Dr. Patrick San Francisco from Goa, and he's a lovely man. I met him last year, and I'm looking for the details of his presence in New York. It's going to be, when is it going to be? April 8th, actually. He will be here just when Francis and Jane Goodall will be. And what a special man he is. If you get in touch with us at abetterworld.tv, or you can email me at mjr@abetterworld.net, mjr@abetterworld.net. I love hearing from you anyway, and getting your feedback and your suggestions, and letting me know of your appreciation of the show and its values and whatever feelings come up inside you from listening to some of this. You know, it's kind of groundbreaking for a lot of people, and we welcome being groundbreakers in people's lives for sure. But Dr. Patrick San Francisco, I know he sounds like he's San Francisco, but it's not. He is going to be in New York, and I guess it was about a year ago, not quite, that I met him initially. And he's traveling around, and he goes into cities all over the world, largely in India, where he became first known. And he both puts his hands on and around people and works with light and sound, and he then goes forward and further to teach people how to activate their own healing mechanisms. And his success rate has been phenomenal, as has been his teaching rate, where people are learning to do this for themselves. And it's just beautiful work. And as I said, we're going to have something posted on our website very soon at abetterworld.tv, or you can email me and I'll get the specifics of where he will be. It'll be downtown on 17th or 18th Streets, might be connected to the Rubin Museum. It was last time. And it's certainly worth your while if you're in anywhere near the tri-state area. And in closing, I want to just let you all know that we have a new sponsor, Higher Brain Living. Dr. Michael Cotton, who was our guest just last week, will be in New York on May 8th to give a demonstration, Thursday, May 8th, at the Meta Center at 6 o'clock. So if you missed him this past time at the New Life Expo or thereafter, just after, at the Pennsylvania Hotel, you can see that same kind of demonstration of what it is to move from the lower brain, the reptilian brain, which breeds the fear, by the way, and keeps us locked into a fear mode and keeps us away from our higher brain, which is something I surely wanted to talk about with Frances, but, time got the better of us in a way. But I will speak with her about this another time. It's a very important idea that if you have your strongest of your brain centers developed, called the reptilian brain, you're going to end up with a world of reptiles. You're going to be living a fight or flight kind of life. You're going to be living an acquisitive life, not inquisitive as much as acquisitive, and gathering all of the nuts to your own squirrel's nest and leaving others behind. It's not healthy and it's not sustainable. But God gave us this human potential that goes far beyond that operation. And when you hear people sounding intelligent, when you hear people speaking from their heart, you get that they are actually coming from the prefrontal cortex and the brain and the heart itself, that the Heart Math Institute is so eloquent in describing and studying and reporting back to us. And this is the kind of evolution we're all engaged in now. If you didn't hear my interview with Michael Cotton, you can go into our website and to the radio archive, and it's right there, and I'd really recommend it. And Higher Brain Living is now a sponsor of A Better World, so we're very pleased to have them as part of our family, and I think they're happy to have us as part of their family. And it's good because it's the kind of work that we really like to support here at A Better World, because if we're going to have a better world, we're going to require this kind of higher level development, which on another level is soul development too. It's all connected. It's all connected. And one of the functions of the reptilian brain is to see the world as separate, distinct from whole, because that's its modus operandi. So keeps us locked into doing the same things over and over again because it kept us alive last year, it kept us alive last month, it kept us alive last moment. So what are we going to do? Reinvent the wheel? No. We're going to just keep repeating what we know biologically work. However, the other higher functions of us have a different conversation and prompt us with that risk-taking that Frances was talking about, Frances Moore Lappe just now, of risk-taking support group, if you will, that we connect to other tribes, to other clans that see the world as we do and can help reinforce a new conversation. I like to refer to it as creating a new consensus about the nature of reality, And if we can up that conversation to one of possibility, and as David Christopher so beautifully said in his book, The Holy Universe, it's not looking at nature as a series of resources, but as plenitude. Well, he used the word abundance. I'll use plenitude. Cornucopia, abundanza. That's really what it is. And that's the kind of energy we thrive on. And, of course, those of you who have listened over the years to Me on a Better World know that Foster Gamble has been a guest of ours a couple of times. The author, the producer with his wife of the great film Thrive, that diagnoses and then provides solutions to a myriad of issues and problems and challenges facing us all on the planet at this time in our very delicate history. We're monkeying around with the nature of things in a way that is daunting. Some of it is good, but the GMO world and the like is daunting and threatening our actual existence of our species. So listening to the wise words that Francis was sharing with us and what we share here on A Better World can really help us all move in a direction of the higher level evolutionary spiral where a level of satisfaction and fulfillment can really be ours, a sense of just beaming well-being. What a nice idea. Just well-being, happy to be alive, grateful for the opportunity, happy to be able to love and experience a sense of brotherhood and sisterhood and of the beloved, however we hold that in our hearts. It's a sacred moment of love. And sometimes it's love for a parent, sometimes it's love for a child, sometimes it's love for our lover, sometimes it's love for our friend. However you look at it, these are all variations on a theme of a fundamental love that exists in our heart, and it's something that we can also produce, create by speaking it into existence. So on that note, I want to just thank our guest yet again, Francis Moore Lappe, author most recently of Economies, Changing the Way We Think to Create the World We Want, and all of her wisdom she shared with us, reminding you also of her website, www.smallplanet.org, that is just replete, abundant, if you will, with good information and knowledge, education about these things, the relationship of our food supply to our larger ecosystems. And I'll sign off now. Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World. Thanks again for joining us. And if you would, pass this on to your friends. I think it's kind of obvious that this kind of information, lightly presented but serious as hell, is really good for our planet. It's really good for people's education that may have a lot of it or might have very little of it, of this ilk. And we really need to spread the word so people's habits can change, people's thinking can change, and we can all get on with a cooperative new society that is coming, and it's got to come or we're all going down with the ship. Just as Reverend Jesse Jackson said, we may have all come here on different boats, but we're all in the same boat now. So on that note, and in that boat, I want to just thank you again for being part of A Better World family. Go to our website. We've also got some products there that are really very cool. The cannabis product of our friend Matsu King is still there, but only very briefly still. But you can find it in the newsletters, that link. We have events coming up. There is a music event. My good friend Bart Reese is a lead singer in a group that will be performing downtown New York City just in a few days. We've got the Pachamama Alliance there. We've got water filters that you carry around like a bottle of bottled water, but instead of buying a new one, you just buy one and you refill it with tap water, and it becomes some of the cleanest water you'll ever put in your body. And these things are very inexpensive. We've also got a large series of videos at YouTube We're on Facebook, Mitchell J. Rabin, and A Better World Media. Come like us. Read my articles at Huffington Post on these kinds of subjects. Truly a pleasure to give you all of this kind of material. It's a pleasure, and don't forget, you can help to support us by pushing the donate button at your leisure as often as you want, and help us stay on the air and thriving. So thanks again for being with me today on A Better World. Mitchell J. Rabin, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.